Hello, and welcome to the Living Well Show, the program that strives to empower older adults to live life on their own terms. I am your host, Nicolette Hume, the Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Lake Oswego Adult Community Center. Today, we will be talking about the mysteries of menopause and beyond. Menopause for many women is seen as a transition that is both accepted, but yet the symptoms rejected. What if we could look at this time in a woman's life as one that is worth embracing and taking all the good with the bad? Maybe if we understood the reasons why this stage must take place, we can have better acceptance for what is rather than what is not. I would like to introduce today Carol Kenworth, who is a family nurse practitioner with 28 years of experience in family practice and emergency room settings. Carol is also a certified health and wellness coach, and her passion for helping people grow and be the best version of themselves is what has led her to pursue this additional education. She enjoys taking the time to discover a client's strengths and talents and celebrate movement in a positive direction through one-on-one sessions. Welcome to the show, Carol. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Nicolette. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to kind of put menopause on a positive spin for a lot of women as we approach this time. It just seems like one of those things that nobody really wants to talk about or go there. So I'm excited.
That is definitely true. And so, the interesting thing about your background is you still are a practicing nurse practitioner, but you have also started up um, consulting with people one on one as a health coach. Could you kind of share with our audience kind of your background as a nurse practitioner and then what has led you to this new transition in your career?
Yeah. So I have always been fascinated by the human body. I've always just thought it is just a miraculous, we're miraculous organisms, and the intricate workings of how our body works is just fascinating, and it's always challenging. I'm always learning something new every day. But in the emergency room setting, I was really missing a lot of one-on-one connection with people because so many of my interactions were just very quick turnaround and trying to kind of get people out of crisis and then move to their next follow up. So I was really missing educating and connecting with people on a one on one basis and seeing transitions and change and um, health progress move forward. And so that's why I decided to get into the coaching. Um, to kind of go a little deeper with people and help them move in a direction forward, and also partner with them to help that move forward. And it's been super exciting and definitely rounding out my interest in health and wellness, and exciting to champion people along on their health journey.
Well, and as you had stated with me before the show, you do work with both men and women. However, it seems as though there may be more of a passion attached to working with women as well. And not only as a practitioner, you are helping them with, things such as menopause or certain other health related things like that, but also the transitional aspects or the wellness aspects to people's lives, or specifically women's lives, whether that be through maybe they're dealing with health issues, but they're also maybe an empty nester, or maybe they are going through a difficult relationship separation later on in life. Um, so I certainly see how, you know, merging the two is way more beneficial for people because unfortunately we don't really have the ability to talk about that with our primary care physicians, in the office. And really sometimes that can be exacerbating our health conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see so many people come into the emergency room with stress related illnesses. Um, they're just kind of out of touch with what's going on in their lives and what's super stressful, but they come in because they have an ear pain or they have a stomach pain. And the source of the pain has to do with stress or anxiety, or certainly we've seen lots of effects from COVID, and all the isolation and changes we've had to make with that. So, people will come in and they say, "Oh, my stomach hurts," and I'm like, "Okay, well, what's really going on in your life?" And sometimes it is relationship stress, and sometimes it's burnout, sometimes it's career changes, sometimes it is something physiologic like menopause. Um, but manifests in a physical way. And that is definitely one of my passions, to just kind of connect how the mind and body are communicating with each other, and how our brains can understand the messages our body's trying to tell us, and how best we can move forward.
So it's almost like our listening to our body as, or maybe our symptoms as kind of like a messenger in a sense. Is that
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
okay?
absolutely.
And so, in regards to aging, how would you say that our culture and society affects that for us? Not just in general as, people getting older, but specifically women.
Yeah. Well, I do think America and the United States in general really does not look forward to aging. We kind of see aging as a time of decline and invisibility. And we don't really want to think about that. We're kind of bombarded by advertisements on lotions and potions to um, look younger, hair dyes. And if you think about going into a department store, the first thing that you're confronted with is like 50 different makeup counters that are all focused on wrinkle reducers and makeup to get rid of age spots, or whatever. So it's kind of constantly there in the background. And so people really don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about getting old. It's a kind of a time of decline and not being very healthy.
Well, aesthetic medicine has become more widely
Mm.
practiced as well as used, but I found it to be really interesting. I think it was Jamie Lee Curtis who came out recently and said that unfortunately we are missing out on um, the beauty of age
Hmm.
that we're not seeing anymore. And I was like, wow. I mean, I look at her and we have seen her from being, in her 20s to now, I think she's in her 60s. And I
Hmm.
just see this timeless beauty. And to have someone within the culture that kind of puts that message out there to us women to kind of, stand for the natural woman, I thought, wow, that's
Yeah.
very powerful. It's too bad we don't hear more messages like that. But I mean, to each their own. There is those options out there for people. But I think sometimes we're just, as women, sometimes just too hard on ourselves with those
Yeah.
transitions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of de-emphasize um, the benefits of getting older, and all the life experience we've had, and the things we've learned, so we don't make the same mistakes, and how we can
Yeah.
project that in the future so that we can, be happy and thrive.
Absolutely. And so, moving on, given the backdrop of aging at this time of decline, what is actually going on in the lives of women as they approach menopause?
Well, for a lot of people are parenting teenagers, because we're in our 40s and 50s, and those of us that have children, we're parenting teenagers who, guess what? They're going through their own hormonal surges. So all of
Mhm.
a sudden, those cute little feet that we used to love to hold on to are now really big and smelly. And now we have some confrontation with some body odors that we have never had before. Or, for our kids, they are starting to talk back for the first time instead of being those nice, sweet little kids. Or they have these really awful, sweating clothes that they put on piles on the floor and they stay there for a week and they really start to smell bad. So, some of us also are working as well as parenting. We are running households, a lot of us. Then we're also engaging in relationships with significant others. And for those male significant others, they often are bombarded by a sea of hormones from their female partners going through menopause, but also from these coming of age kids. And they're kind of blindsided by what's just hit them. Why is everything just so unexpected? Um, we're also possibly caring for aging parents or parents that have passed away. Um, and also, in light of
Mhm.
COVID, we are dealing with juggling multiple activities again, kind of getting back into the swing of things, and sports and schools and appointments. And it's not just sitting at home anymore. So we're trying to kind of ramp back up. So our plates are, we're pretty full. We're dealing with a lot of things on multiple different levels.
Absolutely. And then also trying to hold on a piece for ourselves of ourselves. You know,
Mhm.
who am I regardless of being mom or wife or partner or daughter, just who am I? And what do I value? What fulfills me? And finding the time to, create that space for those things.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I can see. I kind of do feel bad for the men in these situations because yeah, there's a lot going on um, for let's say in a traditional setting where there's a husband
Mhm.
with the kids and the wife, just these two being pulled in two different directions. I can see how that could be overwhelming, and I can't help but wonder if there's also um, I don't know, maybe it would be pheromones that could be affecting them as well, given what's coming off of the kids as well as, the wife in that situation. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Mhm.
What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Well, I think that aging in general, we go through our own transitions, not just specific to menopause, but with aging, libido often changes, sometimes for men as well as women. So, dynamics of how we communicate and relate to each other. Um, Changes, and then we've got these additional stressors of gosh, having our kids go up and maybe thinking about empty nest, and then those hormones and then our hormones, and it's kind of navigating new terrain. Again, just like when we decide to have kids, for those of us that have kids, like we did not really expect what it would be like to raise kids until you're kind of in it and doing it, and then you're just like, oh wow, this is not really what I expected.
Well, and I wonder too, I've heard more research talking about because birth control is something that a lot of people or a lot of women are taking of various forms as opposed to, 30, 40 years ago. Um, and it's more widely talked about. But the interesting thing is how that has affected some relationships. So there being, um, I think I had read in an article, I cannot quote where, probably Huffington Post, but I can't say for certain. But these women talking about how they were attracted to their partner, and then now that they're off birth control, that hormonal change or shift had affected whom they were attracted to, which I thought was really interesting. And then I think about menopause or leading up to it in perimenopause, if the changes in hormones for women, if that can change their attraction level to their partners, or and then also you talk about loss of libido, which has become a very, I mean, it's always been there all along, but it's something certainly more talked about. And I know in some of the in-person programs I've had that women have been very curious about how to combat that. What have you seen yourself as a practitioner, and what are some ideas that you have for people in those situations?
Well, I think, we developmentally are in a different time and space as we hit menopause and those changing hormones. So I think relationships start to mean something a little different. It's not as much, a quick hookup and um, be done, but it's more looking for people to have a connection with and a partnership with. Um, and there certainly are some hormonal treatments that you can use to boost that libido, that attractiveness as well. Um, so that's definitely something to talk to your healthcare provider about, because some of that is aging. And I know for the men, a lot of them are looking into the Viagra's and Cialis, and just to kind of boost their stamina as well. So, and we see lots of commercials with that as well. Promoting those products. So. But sometimes relationships really do change at this time, just because we're confronted with all those other things that I had talked about before. And we're moving in a different direction, and we need to find connection on different levels and different ways, and maybe explore new ways of connection and intimacy. That can be kind of a new exciting challenge as well.
Now, what are your thoughts on bioidentical hormones? Because you hear a lot about that within the naturopathic medicine, or even if you were to go to a, let's say, a more natural foods health store, which we have a lot of them in, the Portland
Hmm.
area, and you see like progesterone that you can take as a supplement or things like that. Or there's other, uh, you know, either naturopath or sometimes just more holistic based physicians who are promoting things like that. What would you say if someone was wanting to try something out like that on their own? What would be your advice?
Yeah. Yes. Now with the internet and people doing their own searches and all kinds of information that's out there, I mean, this is still your body and still your temple. And so, if you're wanting to look into more natural options, I would really encourage you to talk to your healthcare provider about it, rather than just kind of trying some fly by night thing off the internet, just to make sure that it's a safe option for you, because we all have different risk factors for cardiovascular disease, breast cancer, blood clots, things like that. And you just want to make sure that you're not doing yourself some harm by trying, medicines or options on the over the counter that you don't really know where they're coming from. But this standard for treating hormonal or menopausal symptoms is hormone therapy, just because we're
Mm-hmm.
replacing the estrogen that's being depleted. But
Mm-hmm.
to make to your point of the bioidentical, that is the standard at this point. We used to have uh, a hormone called Premarin, which actually was created from pregnant mares' urine, and that put it into a pill, and that's what women would take to replace the estrogen. It was actually coming from horses' urine. So we've come a long way, and now we are going more towards patches, which are created from more synthetic hormones, but they are more like the hormones that we naturally produce. And they're in a patch form, so they kind of skirt the um, liver metabolism, so we don't have to have as high of a dose, but to get an effective treatment.
Okay. And then also too, Can you share with us what the difference between perimenopause and menopause is, and like also what ages we tend to typically see these things
Hmm.
happen?
Yeah. Yeah. This is really interesting because the process is very fluid and it's very unique to each individual. So prior to being diagnosed with menopause, we go through a stage called perimenopause, which lasts on average 2 to 8 years, but sometimes can be up to 13 years. So that's like over a decade. We can still have these kind of flexing symptoms off and on before our ovaries have really decided they're done with action. So, average onset of perimenopause is about 45 years old. And some women don't have any symptoms at all, and other women have menopausal symptoms that are just really unbearable. But menopause officially is diagnosed when you have stopped having a period for a solid year. And that's only the textbook definition because, like I said, this is a very fluid process. But the average age of menopause is 52 and perimenopause is 45, but there's a lot of variability in there. So I hesitate to kind of put numbers on those times because some people can go through it at 38 and some people not until they're 55 for the perimenopause. So but those are kind of like textbook definitions of what's happening.
Well, and I'm curious too, if someone were to have, go through this transition naturally versus unnaturally, let's say they had to have a radical hysterectomy in their late
Mhm.
20s or 30s, like, are the symptoms the same? Like, is it just like an overnight thing as opposed to a gradual transition?
Mhm.
Like, what is the difference, natural versus unnatural?
Yeah. So if somebody has a partial hysterectomy, where the uterus is just taken out, the ovaries generally are still functioning, and you likely wouldn't have any menopausal symptoms until the ovaries go through their natural phase and cycle. But if the ovaries are taken as well, depending on why that was happening, that may determine what treatment options are available. So a lot of women who are in their 20s, for whatever reason, if they don't have a lot of risk factors for cancer or blood clots, a lot of times they will go on hormones to have the bone building beneficial effects and also to minimize hot flashes and the other symptoms that are associated with lack of estrogen. And just like women who go through perimenopause, some have symptoms and some don't, but more commonly with the younger people, I think they would have more significant symptoms than somebody who's kind of gone through the natural phase. But again, treatment options are still up to you and your provider, given risk factors for cancer, osteoporosis, and other long-term effects.
So, in regards to perimenopause, what are the symptoms that women tend to face during that time? And it sounds like it's for a prolonged period of time. Like it could be what, a decade for some women, or up to a
Yeah.
decade?
It can be a long time. And sometimes it'll come in fits and starts because of how our biology is. So, but common, typical symptoms that like everybody's heard about are hot flashes. And 80% of women experience hot flashes. So that's definitely one of the most common. But changes in periods, sometimes they're lighter, sometimes they're heavier. You can have emotional changes as well, like anxiety and depression. You can have sleep disruptions, mental fog or forgetfulness. So I've heard some people call menopause mental pause because you get forgetful. Like we talked about before, the libido changes. You can be tired. Um, you can have some breast pain and tenderness because of those hormonal fluctuations. Um, lipid profile changes, which sometimes will put women at a higher risk of heart disease. Um, and vaginal dryness can happen as well because those hormones are not being produced anymore.
Now, when you talk about the lipid profile changing, is that only if, I mean, could that happen to what we would consider a very healthy person where that would change, just kind of out of the clear blue sky?
Mhm. Yeah, it's not really out of the clear blue sky, but they do. The studies have shown that estrogen can have a protective benefit on the cardiovascular system. So when that changes, along with age-related changes plus risk factors, genetics, that definitely can impact heart disease risk.
Now, as our society has changed and women are no longer necessarily having babies in their 20s, we're seeing it in 30s and even sometimes 40s. How does that affect women's fertility? Because it seems like the follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, kind of seems to go up as we age. And
Mhm.
how does that, why is that, and and how is that related to fertility as we get older?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just talk a little bit about what's actually happening
Mhm.
physiologically with perimenopause and menopause. So, for 30 or so years, as long as we have been menstruating, we've had this very intricate communication between the brain and the ovaries through hormones. So the brain will send this hormone called FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, to the ovaries, and telling the ovaries you better hurry up and get an egg ready for either implantation and pregnancy or to have a period. So the ovaries kind of get busy and then they send estrogen back to the brain and say, okay, we got it under control, everything's good, stop sending the stimulating hormones. And then you either have a period or get pregnant, and then the cycle starts all over again. And this has been going on for 30 plus years that we've just, it's just happening all the time. But this finely tuned process starts to change in perimenopause when the ovaries just say, "Hey, I'm tired. I don't have any eggs to produce. I don't want to produce the estrogen anymore. I'm just tired." So the brain will actually send this FSH messenger to the ovaries and say, "Come on, let's get cracking, get busy. Make that estrogen so we can keep this cycle going." The ovaries just say, I'm pooped, can't do it anymore. And so the level of hormones going back to the brain is decreased. And so the brain keeps sending out more and more of this FSH, which is why those levels go higher. Because they're waiting for that response, that feedback loop from the ovaries. And when they don't get it, that's when you start to experience some of the symptoms. But sometimes the ovaries will rally and they'll say, all right, quit bugging me. Here we go. And they, produce the hormones and they get the egg ready. So during perimenopause, you can get pregnant. So you definitely need to think about that. Just because you've hit the magic number of 45 or 50 doesn't mean that your ovaries are completely done. So, but the regularity of that cycle is really changed and unpredictable. So it's a little bit harder to get pregnant, but still is definitely a possibility.
Well, and that's certainly good news for women out there who are still, trying to conceive, or just holding on to that hope because
Mhm.
our society, like I said, has certainly changed in terms of when people are having their children. And so, in
Yeah.
regards to menopause, what are the signs and symptoms of that? Because, you talk about this long period, potentially long period of
Mhm.
symptoms with perimenopause. And then once menopause has happened, it's not so much the symptoms before, or is it during that year, or is it more focused on what is postmenopause? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, once you get into that postmenopausal period, then you start getting other age-related changes that kind of coincide with menopause. Menopause sort of kicks off that process, but regular age-related changes that affect both men and women are oftentimes some metabolism changes, weight distribution. I know a lot of at times people notice that they start gaining more weight around the middle and they lose their waist. You can get hair loss, gray hair, nail ridges, skin dryness, balance changes, things like that. So those all kind of happen with age, and then menopause kind of, is the entree into that. But like I mentioned before, the by far the most common symptom associated with menopause uh, is a hot flash. About 80% of women experience hot flashes, and 50% of those 80% feel that they are really intolerable. And they really want, that's what impacts their daily life the most. And
So,
what that looks like is
mhm.
that you can get this sudden onset of a flush with reddening of the skin in the head, neck, and chest, followed by an intense body heat, sometimes sweating, heart palpitations, sometimes anxiety. They generally last a few seconds to a few minutes. They can be rare, they can happen every few minutes. They tend to be more frequent and occur at night or during times of stress. They generally last 1 to 2 years in most women, but some women can experience hot flashes into their 70s and 80s, sometimes even to the 90s. So they're not very well understood, but they seem to originate in the hypothalamus, which is a part of the brain that deals with regulating body temperature. Um, so if you think about it, it's kind of like our bodies are not as able to cool off as efficiently or quickly when we are exercising or overheated, and they're not as able to kind of generate heat to get us warm as quickly as before. Um,
Could you
so
die from a hot flash? I mean, could your body get so overheated that it just gives out?
Never heard of that. I will not say it's an impossibility, but never heard of that, mostly because they generally don't last very long. They can certainly, I'm sure you've just, seen people who just like all of a sudden will start fanning themselves, or they'll start, ripping off layers of clothes, to cool off. And then, in a couple of minutes, it's done. But it
Mhm.
generally, it can affect your cardiovascular system in that you can get your heart racing and that kind of thing, but it's not,
Mm.
it's really more a hot and cold balance, like regulation, like your thermostat's kind of going haywire a little bit. But no, I
Okay.
don't think I've ever heard of anybody dying from a hot flash, although some women would say, I feel like I am dying.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in regards to all of these different symptoms, what can women do to treat these symptoms
Yeah.
for both,
Yeah.
perimenopause and postmenopause?
Yeah. So there are a lot of treatments that have been researched. The most common, like we've already talked about, is the hormone replacement. And no longer are we going towards that Pregnemeris urine. It's all based on patches for the estrogen. And if you still have your uterus, it's really important to make sure you have progesterone along with the estrogen, because one of estrogen's effects is that it will build up the uterine lining in preparation for pregnancy or implantation. It's not that it'll make you more fertile. You just don't want to have a lot of uh, lining buildup that just kind of sits there, because that can promote cancer. So you need to oppose it with the progesterone. But there are some other options if hormones are not a good choice for you because of risk factors for breast cancer, or other uh, other cardiovascular issues. Some people are using antidepressants for hot flashes and the moodiness that oftentimes will come with menopause. There are some herbal and plant-based therapies. Sometimes there's been some studies that show that anticonvulsants can be used for hot flashes. Um, but some women don't require any treatment at all. I don't want to say that you absolutely have to have treatment, but for some women, they are so uncomfortable that it really disrupts their daily lives that they want to have something to help with the transition, to just kind of ease their way and make their lives more manageable.
So with, let's say if they do some type of hormone replacement therapy, like the patch or something else hormone related, is there a period of time that it's only safe to use? Like it wouldn't be like, okay, so I'm experiencing this and for the rest of my life, is it okay to continue taking it?
Mhm. So, a lot of that will depend on how long your symptoms are lasting. So, some people will go on the hormones for a year or two and then say, I'm feeling great, everything's good. Let's just try to go off, or let's try to decrease the dose, and see how you do. As long as you don't have a lot of risk factors for other problems, that's an approach that a lot of women take. The studies now are saying that in general, it's fairly safe to take hormones up to about the age of 60, um, as long as you are low risk and you're doing fine on it.
And when you say risk, like what are you referring to?
So, the big risk, of course, is breast cancer, because a lot of breast
Mhm.
cancers and other cancers actually are estrogen dependent. So, if you have a high family history of women in the family with breast cancer, and I mean, you can be tested for different genes to see what kind of cancer they had and are they estrogen dependent, then you certainly don't want to take estrogen. Estrogen can also increase your risk for blood clots. So, if you have a family history or a personal history of blood clots, that would be a big caution, um, as well. So, there's just, you really need to look at the person as a whole, to make sure that you're not increasing somebody's risk by just slapping on a hormone, which is why I'm cautious about these over the counter supplements and things that you can get off the internet. Yeah, they might help your symptoms, but they might put you in harm's way in other ways.
Now, what about soy products? Is there a potential risk for women in regards to that, or even men too?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cultures, the Japanese culture, Asian cultures, they have a lot of soy in their diet. And there was a big hype
Mhm.
about using soy, for a long time because it does have some estrogenic properties. It's just not
Mhm.
as um, easy to measure. And I don't think soy based products have the same effect as the chemical estrogen or the bioidentical hormone. So I don't think it's harmful, but I'm not sure that it's going to be as predictably helpful, if all of a sudden you change your diet to have tons of soy in it for the estrogen piece.
So, like people who are maybe doing more plant based and maybe they're eating a lot more tofu or edamame, should they be concerned at all?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think there's been any studies that show that, plant-based diets, even with high foods that are high in estrogen properties, have had a risk with those kinds of cancers and that kind of stuff.
And also, too, when you were talking about breast cancer, it sounds like the older you get and still having your ovaries, that your risk for breast cancer continues to increase the older you get. Is that true?
Well, the breast cancers we do see tend to be in older women. I mean, you certainly can be in your 20s and have breast cancer. If you have kind of a genetic predisposition, it's certainly not specifically an age-related issue. But naturally, when we go through menopause, our estrogen production really drops. And so that can decrease your risk of promoting breast cancer or having breast cancer grow, because your body's not making the estrogen anymore. But if we're giving our body estrogen and we happen to have an estrogen sensitive breast cancer, we can definitely make those grow.
Hmm, that
So
feels
you
very
need to stay,
concerning.
yeah, you just, exactly. So you need to stay on your screenings for sure and make sure you're just in touch with your healthcare provider about your risk factors, whether that's a good choice, or maybe one of those other options that I mentioned before would be a better way to address your symptoms.
So earlier in the show, when we were talking about some of these symptoms being almost like messengers to us about other things going on, could you talk a little bit more about that? How we can be more attuned to that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would like to have us go through an exercise to get you more in tune with that process. But, like, for instance, I had a girlfriend who she didn't really have the typical hot flashes that I mentioned before, but she was just noticing that she was really irritable and she was just really cranky and she was kind of short tempered, and it would kind of come in fits and spurts. And then she would just kind of look at herself and go, God, what is going on with me? Why am I just so angry with the kids or have this short temper? And she started to kind of track it and go, oh, I wonder if this might be how menopause and how this lack of estrogen is showing up for me. And so it was just kind of, it was, the important piece was that she was paying attention to what was going on and noticing that, instead of just kind of motoring through our days, which are very busy lives, and not really paying attention.
Hmm. And so someone like in her case, you know, she's thinking that there may be a correlation with that. Would she go in and have her estrogen levels checked, or what would you suggest someone do to kind of verify that that is certainly the case for them?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we don't have a really consistent, predictable way of diagnosing menopause from a blood test. And the reason for that is because, like I mentioned before, the ovaries are kind of kicking on and off at random times. And we don't know exactly when that is. So you might be cranky for 6 months, or you might, have sleep issues. And you go into your doctor and you get a blood test for the FSH, or even your estrogen level, and they might be perfectly normal, because you might be testing it when your ovaries are kicked in and producing the estrogen. And so on paper, everything looks fine. And then you think, oh, well, that's not it. And then you kind of are crazy making, because you're looking at, looking at other things. Well, why am I acting like this? So I think it's a really important to just look at trends and look at patterns over time, because because of that fits and starts, process, the pattern coupled with your age and stage in life can be a lot more diagnostic than just a blood test. Now, the flip side is, if you're quite young, and not really in that normal age change, and say you're 27 and your FSH level is through the roof, that can definitely indicate that you're in premature menopause. And so if you're concerned about fertility, that kind of stuff, that's a whole different,
Mm.
the whole different issue, because there's, fertility options and that kind of stuff. But that would be a lot more concerning, like, gosh, our FSH level is really high. That's not normal,
Yeah.
and or not common, and we need to look at that, you know. And for somebody in their 20s who may really still want to have kids, that's going to be a whole different set of concerns than somebody who's
Hmm.
either already had kids or decided they don't want kids or whatever.
I had heard also that biotin, which has become the new supplement for hair, skin, and nails for a lot of
Mhm.
women, can, affect those hormone levels. Is that true? And if so, why?
Yeah, I have not heard about that. I mean, that should not impact the way our ovaries are functioning, it shouldn't impact the estrogen and progesterone. But again, the biotin is really marketed for those age-related changes. That is kind of a little separate issue from the perimenopause, menopause. I mean, we're all going through those changes, and they can coincide. But yeah, I don't think it's going to speed up menopause for you or affect those hormones. That's kind of its own inherent thing. It kind of has its own time clock.
Okay, well, that is good to know.
Mhm.
And, as we've talked about all of these symptoms and the changes, and even I've heard from other women out there who are kind of doing similar work to you, that even in regards to anger that women may experience at this transition in their life, that there's a lot that is misunderstood with that. And I've heard of some women really wanting it to be discussed more, that there is more to it than meets the eye, and they are wanting more understanding, and um, maybe an embracing of some of these things, because again, as stated earlier, a lot of women do feel alone or isolated with some of these symptoms. So going forward, how do we embrace it? How do we look at this time as one that we embrace that transition for what is, as opposed to what isn't? Because what was is no longer. How
Yeah.
do we move forward in a way where we can feel empowered, where we can again just embrace the transition, but most importantly, ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one thing that we can do for sure is flip this narrative that aging is a time of decline. You're kind of over the hill, you're past your prime, you're not going to shine anymore, you're kind of done and put out to pasture. So, if we think about it realistically, most women are in their 40s and 50s going through menopause, but the average woman lives to be 84. So, I mean, in theory, we've got 30 or 40 years left to live and thrive and be happy and healthy. So, that's a lot of time that we can really make a shift and change and not kind of feel like we're being put out to pasture. So, I do have an exercise that I think we can walk people through just to kind of start flipping that narrative, kind of upending that cultural norm, and really promote our health and well-being for the next stage and the next phase of our life. So, if you're willing and game, let's do it. So, if you have
Okay.
just a pen and a piece of paper, I will, say a couple of words, and then I'm going to ask you some questions after the words and have you just write down your thoughts about them and get the wheels rolling and get your body and your brain starting to think about it and process things in a new way. On your paper, first thing is put the word notice. Then after notice, write down things that are going on with your body, things that you have noticed. Just really get in touch with your body. Are you sleeping well? Are you emotionally labile? Are you frustrated easily with your kids? Are you cranky? Are you depressed? And also keep track of your periods. Keep track of the number of flow days, the length of your days, the length of your cycle. Like, really just start noticing these things and writing them down so that you can identify a pattern. And sometimes you'll see clusters of things will come together and you'll be like, oh, yeah, I remember all those symptoms of menopause. Look, they're all here, but they're just spread out and they're coming in different times, and I wasn't putting two and two together. So notice is the first piece. Be aware, self-aware. Secondly, on your paper, write educate. by educating, I mean, what are like look into the best options to help navigate this transition. This is where you're going to talk with your health care provider. You're going to get support from your friends. Learn from your friends as well. If they found something that's been helpful, instead of just going out and trying it willy nilly, just write it down and bring it to your provider to make sure that it's a good thing to try and it's not going to be harmful. Also, consider lifestyle changes. Sometimes weight loss can really decrease the frequency of hot flashes, increase your activity level, avoiding spicy foods. So, spicy foods can often trigger those hot flashes, or considering cutting down alcohol intake, because alcohol can also trigger a hot flash even at the time that you're drinking, but also several hours later can make an impact. So educate yourself. That's a big key. Number 2. Number 3, write down the word define. This is where what you had mentioned before, Nicole, about defining your own voice. Get curious and ask yourself, what do I want out of life, and what do I enjoy doing? What brings me joy? What brings me happiness? Because we are so bogged down and distracted by all of the other things we had talked about raising kids and being in relationship and running a household and having a career, and all of those things that we kind of forget about ourselves. And this is really the time for us to say, hey, let's get in touch with ourselves and figure out what brings me happiness. Next on your list, write the word speak. This is where you're going to speak your truth. Ask for those things that you defined in the previous step. What is it that you want? What do you enjoy? Ask for it. And this may be something as simple as, maybe I just need 20 minutes of quiet time after dinner, just to myself. Or maybe I need my partner to plan a date night and I'll just show up. Or maybe I just need time to spend with my friends. Sometimes we're really out of touch with what we want, and you can try brainstorming ideas with your friends, or hire a coach to explore your desires and figure out what's important to you. And then ask yourself, how can I make that part grow? What would be easy to do that I can just kind of create a balance and an excitement to feed myself, as well as living. So, and finally, write down the word believe. This is where you're going to believe in your capacity to remain strong, vibrant, energetic, and healthy. Okay, and how do we do that? We do this by practicing gratitude. So write down all the things that you have in your life, all the ways that things are going well. Celebrate the ways in which your body is functioning well, excuse me, and working well. And be grateful for what we have at this point. So I really think that we are truly on the verge of experiencing greatness. We are kind of embarking on this second half of our life, and we can just talk to each other, support each other, learn about our bodies, engage with your provider, and encourage each other to be vibrant, energetic, and happy moving forward, because we got a lot more time to go, a lot more life to live.
That's absolutely true. And when you put it that way, the fact that it happening at a time in our life when there potentially is 30 to 40 more years left, I mean, that's a significant amount of time
Yeah.
to do something else. And I really, really love that exercise. I admit I was writing it all down. I do believe in kind of tracking some of those things in your life to just kind of give you more of a bigger picture as to what's going on. But as we come to a close today, Carol, what would you like our viewers to take with them before we end the show?
Yeah. Well, like I just said, I mean, we are on the verge of experiencing greatness. We are, we're in a time in our life where developmentally we're not really caring so much what people think anymore. We used to do that a lot, but developmentally we're kind of at this spot where, like, yeah, we Yeah, we have a lot of potential, a lot of hope, and a lot of ways that we can contribute and be happy and vibrant and consider new possibilities once our kids move out of the house, or, maybe a career change. Like, there's so much that's out there. And this menopausal transition, we don't have any choice over, we don't have any control over it, but we can learn about it and we can use it to our advantage and address the symptoms that work best for our bodies and encourage each other and be vibrant and move forward and have things to look forward to.
Thank you so much for being a part of our show today, Carol. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nicolette. It's been really fun. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And as you've learned today, as our expert Carol Kenworth had shared with us, is to embrace our greatness as women. We have the capacity to do so many amazing things, from bring life into the world, whether it's from actual children or just our gifts and our essence that we bring to our lives as well as others. And we have so much more time after this transition that has been looked at in such a negative way, to get back to embracing ourselves in every stage, that this does not define us, it actually propels us. So thank you all for being a part of our community today. I'm your host, Nicolette Hume. Until next time, always stay safe, be kind, and always stay curious. Take care.